What is going on, everybody? We are back, the ABJ Podcast with Dr. Ethan Wilde. Bring him in momentarily, but I want to just real quick get over some housekeeping. So make sure you guys check the links below for all things ABJ, whether it be social media, merchandise, ways to support. Also, High Tension Wrestling, which is newly acquired. Well, not newly, depending on when this airs. We've been holding it down for quite some time with the Wilde LLC. Also, check the links below for all of my guest links. Follow them on social media or your. So, without further ado, let's bring in my guest, my new boss. My brought me into the High Tension family. Well deserved after many years flying this banner. Now we're here. We're doing big things. So without further ado, let's bring him in. Dr. Ethan Wilde. What's going on, sir?
I want you to know that you need to change that cage match entry where you list yourself as a former Campeones de Ranas.
Oh, okay. I'll fix that. My bad. Yeah. I fun fact, I couldn't even say it, so I didn't even know what I was putting at first, but I thought it looked cool, you know?
What is it?
I have a hard time with Spanish. It's a whole thing.
It's
a whole thing. Why do you think the tag teams are called Big Wood? I couldn't say anything else. So Big Wood it was.
That's the hashtag. We use the hashtag to optimize our algorithmic reach via X.
Yes. Yeah. It'll get more clicks. So it'll get more click throughs.
Calling it X just to be more villainous.
Yeah, I love that. Awesome. So let's let everyone know who you are and what do you do?
I am the well-read machine. I am the chief executive officer of Wilde LLC. I am Capital. I am Punishment. I am Dr. Ethan Wilde.
Love that. Love that. So I've recently been going back and doing some rewatches of the old Camp Leapfrog days. My partner Lily has never experienced any of them, so going back and rewatching has been such a gem. Going back and reliving those days. That's where we met. Was Camp Leapfrog. I came in about halfway through, and what a awesome moment in during a gloom time of the world and professional wrestling, where we were able to film at this location and really bond and meet new people and create some good art.
Yes to all of that. And when I go back and I look at the old footage, I think three things. One, what in the world was that blonde mullet?
Yeah.
That's one. There's no accounting for that. Second is how I wasn't wearing form-fitting suit. I look at it and immediately knew it wasn't tailored. You look at the sleeve length, shirt to jacket sleeve ratio, things like that. Just, poor tailoring. And the third was that I wonder if the further we get away from Camp Leapfrog, the more absurd it looks to people to think everybody's outside. Why are they wearing masks? And not realizing that we were filming this in the middle of 2020. Well before, right in the middle of the pandemic, well before vaccination was a thing, when these were, there was real danger, real presumed danger and risk behind it. And I hope it stands as a testament to what a silly, fun, and occasionally foolish and possibly even incredibly stupid thing that we did, but how it also helped keep us, I think, grounded in reality. And at least having access to each other during that frame.
Yeah, I remember watching the early ones. I didn't get in until Frog Sport and Heavyweights, but I remember watching it and just kind of shooting, Alex messages and just being like, man, I don't know what I got to do to be involved, but everything you're filming looks like it's so much fun, and everyone looks like they're genuinely having a blast doing it. Is there any moments for you that really stand out as for Camp Leapfrog that really stick in your brain?
Maybe not a singular moment. There's a lot of moments that I think back and make me snicker, whether it's the mullet, being thrown in the pool, wrestling in a ring with a vinyl mat 34 minutes after being thrown in a pool, wearing the same outfit, sopping wet, slipping all over creation, nearly murdering myself, let alone Brad Rush, which sadly I did not. It's a lot of absurdities. I had an eye injury. I think that we had a tag team match, and I was wrestling in an eye patch, and that was actually somewhat legitimate, but my level of a customization with an eye patch was not. So I couldn't see anything. I hear that the kaiju wrestlers is the adage is you get vision or you get to breathe, but you can't have both. So I imagine that wrestling in an eye patch is maybe part of the way on to what that experience in kaiju is like. But I think at the risk of sounding too maudlin, finding myself, finding the identity of Ethan Wilde, getting to experiment. The downside is that you're really just surrounded by your peers. So you're not testing out these waters in front of a crowd that they're not clapping for you because they like you, or they're not clapping for you because you've trained with them for ages and they're just thrilled to see you come out of your shell. So not having that opportunity to try things in front of people who paid money and have every right to say what you're doing is the worst thing I've ever seen, or this is outstanding, and really workshopping, focus grouping some of those elements. I miss that, but without fail, everything about it was extraordinarily unique.
Mm-hmm. Was that like the birth of that style of character? Is that something you were doing previous to Camp Leapfrog, or was that kind of like a place where you're really honing in of what you were going to do going forward?
More of the latter. The name emerged like most great ideas I have to, just waking wide awake at 3 a.m, unable to sleep. Oh, here's a great idea for a move. Here's a great name. Here's a great principle. Here's a great idea for merch. And then you have to scramble upstairs and jot it down on paper. So I'd say Camp Leapfrog was the laboratory where that emerged. But, in terms of what you see in my personality, this is an organic evolution. I don't want to be so passe, so blasé as to say it's me turned up to 11. It's what a terrible thing, because it is and it isn't. But what I will say is that narcissism, confidence, a sense of superiority, these were not hard stretches for me to come by.
Yeah. Do you pull from something or someone when kind of creating a character? Do you kind of look at somebody or have an experience with somebody and be like, oh, okay, and then kind of pull from that to add to the character, or is, like how you said, is just kind of coming along and figuring out as you go?
I think the answer is yes. The answer is yes, but I also don't know what. Right. I look like my background's in social science, so I'm by default a nurture, not a nature person, sort of ingrained in the training. And so anything that I believe, anything that I perceive as true of any person, any human being, is ground in the experiences you have growing up. And so I'm not going to come to conclusions based on things that I haven't seen. So what I observe and what I draw from, absolutely a part of my upbringing. And this is a stretch, but for instance, I remember growing up and I would watch like the old Bond films, like the classics. Roger Moore, who's the other one, everyone's favorite? Roger Moore.
Connery.
Yeah, Sean Connery. And sort of that sense of, here's somebody who's worldly, intellectual, well-dressed. He's not dislikable, right? He's desirable, he's admirable. And an element of that, but also, I suppose I'm struggling to think of where elements of, say, the pompousness come. I've heard a lot of comparisons to, say, crypto/tech bros or current owners of electric automobile manufacturers and or dreadfully named social media websites. And there's zero intent in any kind of similarity whatsoever. If it happens, it's organic. If it happens, it's absolutely an accident. So there's at least one influence that is deeply, deeply unintentional. It does happen. It will probably continue to happen. it's the dangers of swimming in the same lane as that person does.
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll kind of rewind here. When did you fall in love with the world of professional wrestling, and when's your earliest memory of it?
I was talking about this at the offices. I was in the elevator and I heard somebody on a team that I'm not on. I heard the phrase, and I even had my headphones then, but I still heard somebody say WWF Tag Team Champions. And so I, of course, interjected. I said, "What are you talking about?" And they were talking about wrestling. And so I relayed the story of when I knew it was important. It was going to be a fundamental and unflappable part of my life. Had TV on Saturday morning, cartoons were over, wrestling was on. I saw Demolition. I thought they had the coolest, I still think they have the greatest theme of all time. Rick Derringer, Eat Your Heart Out. Best theme, face paint, leather with spikes. They were heavy metal, punk rock, Road Warriors personified. And I was watching it just enamored. I had no idea what I was seeing, but I knew it was neat. My mom walks by. Without missing a beat, she says, "Turn that S off," verbatim. It's exactly what she said. And that, look, let me be very clear. Don't tell me not to do something. It's not a stretch. Like if I tell you, "Hey, guess what? I'm a contrarian," you're not going to be shocked. So if you tell me don't watch something, don't try something, don't do something, guess what? You've guaranteed it's going to happen. And so it was that moment. Turn that S off. And I realized I'm on the cusp of discovering something incredible here. And so I'm gonna stick with it. I'm gonna commit to it. And sadly I did.
Yeah. I actually got to host a Q&A with them randomly. I showed up at a con and they're like, so everyone who bailed, like that was supposed to host the Demolition like Q&A meet and greet breakfast thing they were doing. So they're like, "Do you want to host it?" And I was like, "Me and BP." And I was like, "Can I also film it?" And they're like, "Yes." And I was like, so I like hosted a Q&A with Demolition. It was the coolest thing ever. So what type of kid were you growing up? Were you always into sports? Were you a theater-minded kid? And how did that translate later on into stumbling into pro wrestling?
I was a weird kid, I suppose, like a loner, a nerd. I voracious book reader, love to read books. I read encyclopedias. Like I read them from front to back. A little too revealing, perhaps.
The well-read machine.
Yeah. A little bit social. I didn't play sports much. I was terrible at sports as a kid. I tried baseball, terrible at baseball, tried soccer. I liked kicking things, but I didn't understand and I didn't express any interest in the strategy of kicking things. I just wanted to kick things. Basketball, I received what I will tentatively call a Road Warriors pop at the gymnasium at Blessed Sacrament Elementary in Fort Mitchell, Kentucky, for the one basket that I scored in my 8th grade year. Because there was this, "Oh no, here we go again. Guess who's got the ball?" I shoot it. It goes in, and yeah, Road Warriors. Because
everyone goes nuts.
Right. And I think it was the only 2 points I scored that entire season. And maybe one other. But if then, it was probably a free throw. So 3 points on the season. Me and Ben Simmons. So not an athlete, a reader, a video gamer, a wrestling watcher. I suppose I stuck to myself, at least like as a young child. Create your own worlds, entertain yourself. You get accustomed to these things. And I suppose long-term, I consider myself a fairly strong idea person, particularly if it's for other people. So, and you can ask my colleagues that I'm very good at coming up with great ideas for them. Whether or not they try them, that's on them.
Yeah.
So that's a little bit, I think, of who I was as a child.
I love that. Now, yeah, I wish I would have, if I played a lot of sports, but now my body's paying for it. I wish I would have been more of a theater kid or a performing arts kid, or dove more into the arts. Because like now doing promos or playing a character, or, you know, like I got to enter the ring and do something that I never thought I'd ever do. But I was just like, oh, that was kind of fun, immersing yourself into something and being something that's you but not you, if that makes sense. And I was like, it was kind of a rush. Like it's like when I first got into commentary, I was like, I'm not going to play a character. I'm just going to be me on commentary because my brand and the podcast, and that's a whole. And then kind of stepping away from that and then playing more of the heel commentary or being a little mean here and there. Like it's fun. I'm really, really enjoying it. I kind of wish I would have tried more theater and production.
Mr. BJ, are you patting yourself on the back for helping us lose the Campeones de Ramos?
Yeah, I did kind of bail on you, so that's on me. That's on me. But I set up a great distraction, you know. But they're monsters. They're tough. They're tough guys. I'm not trained. I was in jeans. You know what I mean? I didn't know where my hat went. Someone threw it. It was a whole thing.
There might have been 7 of you, but it was truly a handicap match in Travis and Max's favor.
Yeah,
Kingsglaive, whatever.
Kingsglaive, yeah, they're scary. They're very scary.
Final Fantasy oddities. They're named
after. So when did you start to pursue your industry, and how did you go about finding the school and taking that leap?
Purely by circumstance. I remember it was an incredibly busy. I know that before we hopped on this podcast, we were chatting, and I talked about how I've had an incredibly busy week and can scarcely remember what day it is. I had a very busy week, I think 7 or so years ago. And I think I went up to New York for the day for work, came back, we were based out of Philadelphia at the time, went up to New York for work. I think I flew out to LA for a job interview, turn right around and come back. It was 6 hours, leave at 6 a.m., land at 9 a.m., get a car to the studio, 8-hour interview, red eye home. So land at 7 or 8 a.m. So 24 hours later, back here, drive up to work, which was an hour and a half each way, work all day, come home. And then the Jake the Snake biopic was playing at the Ritz in Center City, Philadelphia. I went by myself and very cognizant of the sadness, the malaise, the ennui of being an adult going to a movie by yourself about wrestling. And I grabbed a random seat. Place was packed. So Jake the Snake was going to be there. Diamond Dallas Page was going to be there. Scott Hall was going to be there. Scott Hall, Demolition opened the door and made sure I stuck around. Scott Hall was what I thought was the coolest human being of all time. Razor Ramon, even catching a glimpse of the Diamond Stud with his breakaway overalls and his Dwayne Wade. Was that a different road character? Scott Hall was the coolest. And there was no way I was going to miss this in person. So I sit in a random seat and I look to my left and I'm sitting next to Zia Hilty. I don't know if you know Zia. She's a longtime independent wrestling photographer, Ring of Honor, Chikara, many, many others. And she's sitting next to her friend, Bryce Remsburg. And I know Zia at this time through being involved in roller derby. At this point, I think I'd been involved in the roller derby scene. I can skate really well, by the way, for 11 or 12 years. And so as a referee. And so Zia looks to her left and sees a wrestling referee and looks to her right and says, a roller derby referee. And she says, Bryce, this is my friend. This is Bryce. And clearly you have referee things to talk about, which a little preposterous on the surface for a host of reasons. But we did, chat very amicably. And he pointed out that the Wrestle Factory up the street had a free session, 2 hours, just sign up and show up. And I had been to dozens of independent wrestling shows, and I've never once as much as put my hand on the ring. In my mind, that's a show of respect. Yeah. That's where wrestlers belong. And I don't touch that unless I'm a wrestler. So I never did. And I thought, well, maybe I'll get to. right? And there's that degree of knowing. And once you open Pandora's box, you can't unknow the feel, the bounce, all the nuances and intricacies of a ring. So that's really what happened. Is Zia connected me with Bryce. Bryce invited me up to the Wrestle Factory. I tumbled around. Fire Ant put us to work, and I went home a sweaty mess. And I said, I'm going to try this out more.
Now, were you going to do the wrestling aspect, or were you going to possibly just carry on and being a professional wrestling ref?
I didn't have a particular goal at that point. I think I started a little bit later in life than the average bear, but
like a little DDP here.
Yeah, very much so. Nicer teeth.
Yeah,
but one fewer, but the ones I have are nicer.
Yeah.
I didn't have a goal. I think I just wanted to know, and that's I think going back to, you asked sort of what kind of child was I like. Curious, right? That explains voracious reading. That explains creating worlds in your own mind, playing games, just learning, exploring, being told not to look into something, and then feeling this desire in your heart that says, no, I have to know. Curiosity. So it was really just curiosity. And the curiosity just kept me pushing. At the time, I just thought, I just want to understand the mechanics of it, the performance of it. And it never quite got away.
Yeah, you got the bug. Now, if this is too personal, we can skeet around this one, but obviously Leapfrog was a point for people at not just a pandemic tough time, in the world a tough time, but it was a place where a lot of this talent was from a home. And without going into the circumstances, that home was then kind of taken away. It was a moment where you guys all had a sense of community, a place where you guys bonded, and then it was kind of gone, and then uncertainty was there, because I mean, kind of experienced it a little bit later on myself when it came to like putting your trust and faith into people, and those people kind of letting you down, and they're no longer around, and it's almost like losing a family member, or someone that like you put a lot of stake into, or someone like you looked up to, and then they just completely are looked at differently after. How was it navigating that, at that place, and then kind of carrying on post that into Camp Leapfrog?
That didn't affect me at all. So
Okay.
I left the Wrestle Factory a year and a half before any of that happened.
Oh, okay.
I'd been training there for a very long time. I'd seen people who started training after me who would get moved into, say, show ready positions, and I would justify it in my mind by looking at their skills. I mean, we're talking about incredibly talented people that I would never want to discredit. Incredibly talented people, lots of skills. They're of a body type. Their wrestling prowess is existing. So existing skill set, unique value proposition, and they had it. So they would start training after me, and I would see them on shows, and I would think, okay, that checks out. There's only so much of that I was able to tolerate. And there was a moment where I realized that some people, plural, who I had no respect for as performers, as trainees, as individuals, were getting moved into shows. And that was when I saw the writing on the wall. So one of the nicknames that I had toyed around for myself was the true adult of professional wrestling. I'm a deeply responsible person. I was helped out on the Chikara crew for a number of years. I missed one show, and I remember giving 9 months notice on missing that because I was going across the country for a friend's wedding, my best friend's wedding. I was his best man. Mm-hmm. That was the level of commitment that I gave to that company. And when I saw people get opportunities, again, who started after me, I would justify it, and I could justify it until I couldn't. So when Chikara shut down in 2020, I was gone for a year and a half at that point. So I had no trouble navigating that space at all because I didn't have to. I was long gone at that point.
Where did you transfer to? Is that where you went to the dojo?
Yep. Yeah. So the Wrestle Factory, So my mechanic is up in that part of Philadelphia. So I had to go up there maybe a month ago, and I was shockingly there was no traffic on 95. A Christmas miracle to be sure. And I thought I've got to kill a couple minutes before the mechanic opens. And I drove down Wingate Street, and I saw that it was still painted up to look like the Wrestle Factory. And I thought, it's still painted up to look like the Wrestle Factory. And then just continued on to the mechanic and dropped my car off. And $450 later, the engine light is no longer on. So that's good. I appreciate that. So it's maybe a 10, 15-minute drive. And the dojo is a little bit longer than that, but not much. It's incredible the wealth of schools in or near the Philadelphia area. You have the Worldwide Dojo, Cheeseburger, Preacher, Eli Isom shows up, other guests show up on occasion. I'm sad that I was in New York the other day for work. I missed Willow Nightingale. I missed Penelope Ford were up there training. Like
I'm such a Willow mark. I love Willow.
Yeah.
Another Camp Leapfrog. That's where I met Willow. Was that Camp Leapfrog?
True. That I think, having previewed your questions, some of her epistemic worldview will come up a little bit later.
Yeah.
So the dojo's close by. The Monster Factory in Paulsboro, Combat Zone in South Jersey. There's a lot of opportunities. They're all a little bit different. And Berger and I were talking. We had a very long road trip on the way back from Route 33 Wrestling in Spencer, West Virginia, Saturday night. And I adore the fact that he's a tough trainer, but he's a kind person. And trainers, the skill set and the personality, right, have to achieve a level of awareness of the people who you're training. And I've known this man 5 years now. I think I've seen him angry twice. And I've personally thought he's probably had 6 or 7 dozen true opportunities to be angry, and he never is. The amount of patience and grace that he shows towards his trainees and welcoming of guests. You know, if you've got Willow Nightingale showing up, if you have special guests training on Monday nights, you know, that would surprise you, then that speaks to the kind of human being you are, both as the quality of education you get, but also the kind of person that he is. And some of that, I think, speaks to the legacy of the Ring of Honor dojo that he came through. So that's where I am. I continue to train with Cheeseburger. I continue to train with Preacher. And like I said, I'm glad that you messaged me, even if this might be airing 6 years into the future when we've been owners of High Tension Wrestling. We're celebrating our 7th anniversary.
Yeah.
You know, I was planning on going to train with Preacher tonight, but I'm glad that you reached out and reminded me.
What were the beginning stages of finding yourself in this business, and how was it navigating? I know a lot of people, when they go to a wrestling school, they try something new. They usually go with a friend, and then like the friend backs out, and then they're kind of by themselves. But like to me, hearing that story, just kind of entering that world blindly, completely alone, is like inspiring to me, because I don't like, a lot of people kind of need their handheld to try something new for the first time. Like they need that nudge, or they need that like, let's go together. Like, but it's just insane to me that you enter this world of professional wrestling not really knowing much or knowing people, and just walking in the door and giving your body up essentially to another human being.
Well, I mean, you're absolutely right. I was talking to some of my teammates at work. So the team that I manage at work, and I was telling a story when I was 19 years old. Was a miscreant, undergraduate, couldn't care less, just drinking all the time, a miserable wreck of a human being. And I was working at a pizza restaurant, a pizza chain in the Cincinnati area. And they made me like a manager, which, no kidding, $8.25 an hour to be a manager.
Killing it.
Yeah, not quite as financially well off as I am these days. But at one point, and I'd grown up working in the back of the house, you know, make food, you can smell bad, you can listen to whatever you want, you can yell and curse at people, you can flail knives around, you can disappear and smoke cigarettes. It's great. for the time,
Yeah.
to be very clear. And now all of a sudden I have to dress well, and they're trying to like get me out into the dining room. And I like taking your cat to the vet clung to this barrier, and they're trying to drag me out to talk to customers and say like, hey, how was everything tonight? Is there anything I can do for you? And in hindsight, yeah, I think that it felt artificial because I frankly don't care if their pizza was good or not.
Yeah.
But incidentally, I didn't last long as a manager. But to me, it was interesting as I'm not an extrovert. I can present as one, absolutely, but I'm not. Extroversion drains my batteries, but I can do it. And I think the philosophy is I've got to be my biggest advocate. I've got to be my biggest fan. I've got one life. I'm going to go experience it. I talked to a friend years ago. I went to a show, and I remember her asking, "You mean you went by yourself to a concert?" And I thought, yeah, I saw The Exploited last night. Something like teenage me would have thought was the coolest thing ever. That they're still touring in 2024, but I don't know that they've been in Philadelphia. They show up in the States like once every 5 or 7 years. Their singer's 67 years old. I drove to Harrisburg sometime last year and saw the band Fear. The singer's 74 years old. Something to be said about, people in their late 60s, early 70s still singing the same sort of anti-systemic punk anthems of their adulthood. An irony that I would just leave untouched and proceed. Really, I saw Tony Deppen at that Fear show. But why would I cheat myself out of life because I don't have somebody else to hold hands with?
Yeah. It's a good point. I think more people should try that. It's liberating. It's very it strengthens you as a person just to kind of like self reflect and kind of be by yourself. Like when I went through what I went through in my life, and I had to be by myself, and I was, once again, I'm very introverted but present extroverted, and I kind of need that extrovertedness to do what I have to do. But it's when I had to kind of shut the door and go away for a couple months, like just sitting on my own thoughts and reestablishing who I am, like was very healthy for me.
That's superb. I mean, your personal health, your personal sense of well-being, to pull Maslow's hierarchy of needs, your ability to self-actualize is essential.
Yeah, totally. What were some setbacks or adversities you have overcome so far in your career?
Two physical and one quasi-psychological, but I feel like that's a cop-out. Physical, I had a hand injury, and I tore a tendon in my left hand in training, early 2018. Hop out of the ring, drop down, grab the bottom rope, pull yourself in, simple, front roll. Really easy exercise, had done it hundreds of times. Bandera out, drop down. As I dropped down, I grabbed the bottom rope, and I missed it with all except for my left ring finger, which you see like cannot bend at all now. All of my weight pulled against that finger like a fulcrum, and it caused the tendon to just rip off the bone. They had to sew it back in place, which it was funny. I had a button on my fingernail, like they sewed through the finger. And for a 2-week period, I had a button. But that was like an 8-month recovery for something seemingly very innocuous.
Was that something right away you knew you're in trouble? Like,
No, yes, but it was the wrong thing. I thought
it's like a finger. Like you're like, I'll be fine. Just keep moving. Like,
I thought I broke my tailbone because in the process of dropping down and falling back, this was not a pony ring. It was a full height ring. So I fell from that full height, essentially through my butt onto the concrete because there was no padding down. I thought I really screwed up my hip, my tailbone, something like that. Had a nasty hematoma, but nothing abnormal. It was really the finger set me back a number of months. I couldn't grab anything. Obviously, I had to have surgery. And then I came back. When I did come back, about 4 weeks after coming back, I fractured my right hand. And so that set me back like another 2 months, 3 months, something like that. So
Yeah.
2018 was a wash. And I think like the psychological setback, I'll be completely transparent that there is a degree of, I know that respectfully, influencers and people who are online like to joke about this idea of being paid in exposure or having access. And as a person who should value their financial worth, you have every right to reject this concept of exposure and demand compensation for things. So please don't mistake what I'm about to say for that. There is a modicum of cultural capital that at the time and even today comes from having performed on a Chikara stage. I never had that opportunity. I never was offered that opportunity. And again, in full transparency, I believe I've had to work that much harder to try to establish myself, to try to develop gravitas and credibility amongst wrestling fans, because I didn't get that cultural capital to carry with me. And that might be considered controversial or disagreeable by some of my colleagues who went through that system. But, you know, honestly, if they want to disagree with me, that's their right to do so.
Yeah. No, I totally get that. Now, when you go through an injury and you're kind of, you go through something like that, and you're also in like more of the corporate world, doing pretty well for yourself, right? You know, killing it there, traveling, and then you go to work and they're like, what, like, you're here, like, why are you risking your body and your life to do this art? Like, or they probably don't see it as art, but how do you navigate that in the professional world and then introducing the professional wrestling side of things as well?
So one of my teammates' last day is tomorrow. They're a co-op, so they come from a university. They're not graduated. It's not a full-time position. It's part of a business school program. Let's put you in the corporate world for a short period of time. It's been a really exciting experience. Taking somebody who's like, they're not even graduated yet, so putting them into a corporate environment, socializing them to the speed that business works at, the lexicon, the terminology, the way that people speak, the needs they have, how you put together PowerPoint decks, how you're expected to do these intense data analyses, or like connect with other stakeholders, cross-functional teams, share results with, you know, the C-suite. It's incredible. I could not imagine myself at that age accomplishing that with any level of maturity. And I'll say that my co-op is very good, and sad to see them go. But as we were chatting, and in fact, we sort of had a end of term review today, where I was going through sort of my general feedback, and I said, and this is advice I'd give to anybody, is always show up as your full self. Always be unapologetic about who you are. It doesn't mean that you have to be loud. It doesn't mean that you have to be obnoxious. But what it means is that if you believe in something, or if you feel the need to stand up for yourself, that you should. And if that ever feels challenged and you ever feel pressured to not be yourself, you're in the wrong place. And you need to figure that out for yourself. Do I try to be this way? Do I hide who I am? Do I stand up for who I am, or do I find another path? Really, those are your choices. And of course, nobody wants to pick the first. Nobody wants to hide who they are. But maybe there's an opportunity to change, and maybe there's an opportunity to grow. And that's when this came up in the context of the co-op, because this is a very young person, again, not even a college graduate yet, but they displayed that. We would talk very transparently how they felt about things, what their skill set was. And I'll never not respect that, because I would never want anybody to show up as anything but who they are. And so that's kind of my advice. It's not this, you know, smarmy, take it or leave it, I'm going to tell you how it is, and just might be gripey. No, it's just, I want to know who you are as a person. And again, it's a matter of trust and respect. If I share that with you, it's because I trust and respect you. If you want to know more about it, great. If you don't want to know more about it, great. I'm not going to force it on you, but I'm not going to shy away from who I am.
Yeah.
If I had a mask, it would be very different.
Yeah. when do you feel like you hit your peak, or have you not hit that point yet?
I'm alive and physically capable of this. Peak to me is moot. Yeah, I mean, if you want to force it on me, I don't think I've hit it. You know, I don't
think
have,
so either.
yeah, I don't think I've had I don't think I've had a match that I would say you've got to watch this.
Yeah.
You know, in terms of goals people have, you know, show up on TV, have a dark match, wrestle in Japan. Like, people have a lot of the same goals, and and I hope that everybody, except for Travis and Max, achieves all of them. But honestly, my goal is another day that I'm able to do this, and then the day after that, the day after that.
I'll going back and rewatching the Can't Believe Frog stuff as well. It put into perspective to me as like also of like when I always like think of it in the moment, right? And I don't like think of the past going forward. And going back and watching what everyone essentially created at Can't Believe Frog, and you were a big focal point in a lot of those stories. Like you were the antagonist for a lot of those stories going forward, and now kind of reclaiming that under high tension and being a focal point in the story as well. Like, it's one of those things where if someone goes to a show and they see they were at the show in Philly and they're like, oh, I don't know what happened here, but this whole takeover thing is cool. I'm intrigued. These characters are good. And then they dive back and they go back and rewatch that footage of understanding the character and the build. It's like, it's almost like maybe none of us will ever make WWE or AEW or TV wrestling or be seen by millions. But I feel like if you find that body of work that has been accomplished and where it's going to go continuing, it's a fun story and it's a fun art piece. And like, I'm proud to be a part of it. And I'm proud to like be included into that, because going back and rewatching it really put in perspective of like how much, like, it's a legacy. Like it'll never be taken away from any of us, like, or any of them. Like, yeah, it's fun. It's a lot of fun. And some people are Will Ospreys and some people just tell stories and make moments. And I think you're definitely one of those people that you're very talented in the ring, but that character is so demanding and it's so appealing. And it's just that story that builds and builds and builds and builds. And you're very intelligent to remember those past moments and call back to them and make a fan almost be like, I don't know what he means by that, but now I want to go seek it out. Like when you were kind of in the most recent stuff, like going back and talking about those Can't Believe Frog days, people are like, I don't get, like, if they're listening properly, they will seek out that previous. And it's just fun. It's a lot of fun.
It's you know, I'm grateful to hear that. I don't recall the specific moment. I want to say it was in January or February of this year. And I think I was reading some dirt sheets. We all do it. And it was about somebody I consider an acquaintance sort of reaching the tail end of their career, or like being frustrated about not being on television. I don't remember the specific circumstances, but in the moment, it unlocked this concept in my mind where anybody in wrestling in any role can look up and immediately see somebody directly above them in this sort of self-created hierarchy. And they can see somebody that they can think to themselves, why don't I have what that person has? Or many people, they say, why don't I have what that person has? And then you get into that spot and then you look at the person above you, and instead of saying, I made it, I really did, I achieved it, you look up and you say, well, why don't I have what that person has? And what's psychologically a miserable way to live your life. Yeah. If you're Roman Reigns, if you're Cody Rhodes, if you're MJF, if you're Will Ospreay, then maybe you don't think that way. But frankly, who's to say? I don't think everybody in wrestling thinks that way. I think everybody in wrestling has the opportunity to wallow in their own self-created misery if they allow themselves to do so. And I see that happen an awful lot. So I received a message out of the blue from somebody who I respect a few weeks ago. And they said, you know, I think it's really cool that you're showing up in these other promotions and you're this focal point of high tension. And I really needed to hear that at that point, because it really reinforces that perspective I mentioned a moment ago. You can look at other people and be envious of what they have, or you can be grateful for what it is that you have. And I spend my energy trying to live in the space where I'm in the latter. I'm grateful for what I have and actively cultivating that sense of gratuity.
Yeah. You look back at like the Goons. The Goons were a stable in professional wrestling that were traveling across promotions and continuing these great storylines and moments and creating a big back catalog of just a bunch of friends creating cool art and doing cool things. And the Wilde LLC obviously started like here and then kind of forming into this Wilde LLC and having the members that are in it now. And you look at, I look at it and I go like, this is like an unsung all-star team. And whether people may not know it or not yet, like there's really talented people involved in this team, in this group. And I think it's just the beginning. Like I kind of like quoting Triple H, just like, we're only in the third inning right now. Like there's a lot of baseball to be played here. And it's so fun that it can go from like these disgusting heels to possibly like
Disgusting.
because sorry, not disgusting heels, but heels nonetheless. But I also see like there's comedy aspects to it, and there's so many different variables that this team can take it because of the talent of the people in the group. And I'm excited to see where it grows, and I'm just pumped. Like it's a lot of fun. It's just I really I love this team. It's a fun team, and I can't wait to see where the story continues.
I think on the comedy bit, I don't know that he knows this. I think I've only seen him in passing at an airport once in like the last 5 years. I was training with Chuck Taylor one day, and he talks to himself like he tweets. Like his very self-deprecating soliloquies. I think, and is in that moment in training where the person who's training is doing the thing where they're sort of talking themselves through what is the next exercise that we're going to entail. And so he's sort of shadow boxing to himself and, you know, mouthing words under his breath. And then he throws his hands up and he says out loud, "Doesn't matter anyway, wrestling's stupid." But in a very Chuck Taylor kind of way. So it's a little just goofy enough. It's not like a worrying level of self-deprecating. It's a little goofy. And I will be very honest, that moment unlocked, he's responsible for, I think, two lessons that I think unlocked wrestling, how I think about wrestling. Accepting that wrestling is stupid.
Yeah.
In concept, in principle, and execution. And I mean this with no disrespect for the challenge of the craft, how hard people work at it, which I think a lot of fans have no concept. Wrestling fans know more than they think they do and less than they think they do. And actual professional wrestling is an alien world to them. But when you accept that it's stupid, it unlocks a willingness to stand out, to perform. I think it's that theater kid that you were talking about earlier, that if you don't realize that it can be goofy in the right doses and at the right times, you're going to be locked up. You're going to be quiet. You're going to look like Dean Malenko, or I'll pick Chad Collier. Chad Collier was like a Midwestern guy from the mid-aughts, outstanding technical wrestler. I wish he would have made it, but he didn't, because from a performance standpoint, he didn't really do goofy stuff. He performs like Dean Malenko, but with not as much charisma. And okay, so maybe that didn't sound respectful. But if he had, I think, understood that there's like this goofy element, he could have been, I think, an excellent performer, certainly in early NWA TNA or other promotions that came out of WCW. Accepting that wrestling is goofy, is stupid. And I mean that, again, it's not a disrespectful thing. It means that a willingness to do different things, to think outside the box, to not be constrained by tough person fights another tough person. And that those are the parameters that you cannot step outside of.
Mm-hmm. I mean, that embodies my favorite wrestler on the scene right now. Like that's Orange Cassidy. Like,
yeah,
like that's essentially like, and when people say they can't understand his character, it's like, it's almost like talking to a Rick and Morty fan. Like, are you laughing at the jokes because they're deep? Are you laughing at the fart jokes? You know what I mean? Like it's you're not understanding it at the deep level of like the level of what they're trying to accomplish in their art. And that's essentially Orange, like wrestling, like kind of that same, and I mean, they're buddies, him and Chuck, but like wrestling's kind of silly. Just have fun with it. He's insanely talented, but his character is like doesn't always take himself super serious, but when he does as a character turn it on, like I was at AEW last night. He was fighting Jericho, and normally he comes out, hands his pocket, really sloth, you know what I mean, like slow. But there's a feud there. They hate each other, so he immediately run in, shot a double, and start beating him up. And it immediately was like, oh, Orange is here to fight tonight, and it's you almost gear yourself to a different character.
He double like Jericho.
Kinda, yeah. Like, well, no, they start off with a lockup, and then and then he kind of like double legged him, and then full mounted him. But it was like. But he didn't start off his normal slow style. He just kind of like, I don't like you, I'm going for you, which is I like when he kind of hits that gear as well.
Think about the moments that will stand out to you in 10 years. And if that shot of Wembley Stadium with one whimsy little rocket spiraling limply on top of the arena with this drone shot doesn't stick in your memory relative to the mountain and wall of fireworks that you saw all across the rest of the show, or all across WrestleMania, any episode of television, any premium live event, or like whatever it is that they're calling it these days. That's going to be the moment that sticks out in your head this year. It's so different. It's so unique. And it's also very stupid.
Yeah. I was at the first Wembley Stadium. I went to London for it. And
that's
it was so cool because once again, I didn't work with a lot of these people. I just worked with the people they worked with, and kind of hearing the stories from all of you of like, oh, this person inspired me. They helped me so much. And they went from wrestling in the same venues we did to now they're in London. And seeing that scramble match with Orange and Best Friends and Kingston and like they all kind of come and like we're following in the footsteps that they kind of created on the Northeast wrestling scene, and now they're killing it. Like they're like everyone's like, oh, AEW sucks, WWE's way better, but it's like we're the underdogs. They're the punk rock version of pro wrestling. They don't have the WWE funding or money yet. I mean, they kind of do with Tony Khan, but I mean, like they're still starting. But it's these grassroots Northeast guys and girls who are just been grinding this whole time to lay the way for kind of us right now. And just like that, they sold out Wembley Stadium, like one of the most selling wrestling shows of all time. Like I got emotional. I was like, this is crazy. Like
I want to touch on fans who actively dislike a company. There's so much pro wrestling. There's 8 hours of AEW content a week.
Yep.
Probably excluding Ring of Honor, which is also a weekly program. There's another 8 to 10 hours of WWE content a week. Maybe 8 hours and 7 minutes if you consider their silly Twitter show. Tonight, Wrestling Open starts in an hour. Every weekend, IWTV is showing dozens of hours of content. And then there's independent wrestling. There's great independent wrestling in the Northeast. There's great independent wrestling in Florida, in Tennessee, in the West Coast, Portland, Los Angeles, San Francisco. That's just the United States. That's not North America. That's not, I think Cheeseburger is getting ready to go on a European tour. I met Cheeseburger for drinks in Rome a year and a half ago because he was there. And I said, where are you? And he was 2 kilometers from the hotel I was staying in. So we hopped on a subway, went down to Gabriele Bonci's Pizzerium, and then went out for drinks afterwards because he was there for wrestling. There's great wrestling everywhere. And I want to get back to the original point. Anybody who's angry about the existence of another wrestling company is just somebody who's addicted to their anger. And I pity somebody who lives actively searching for something to be miserable about.
Yeah. So who are some influences or role models that you have in this industry, whether it's professional wrestling wise, or maybe just people outside of the world of wrestling that you feed from to inspire you or motivate you?
In no particular order, I would say Bourdain, myself, and probably Willow.
That's a great list. It's a great list. Willow. Oh my God. Yeah. I hope she wins the world title, but
what's her saying? It's not like life stinks smile anyway. It's I forget what the first part of it is, but it's sort of like, here's here's something to be upset about, but like smile anyway. And I don't do that. Like that's not me as a person, but like as an aspirational belief. Bourdain is somebody, Bourdain, and I say, okay, hybrid, Bourdain and John Waters at the same time. So similar philosophies, but from different angles. Bourdain found the common humanity and beauty in the world in every corner, in accepting, trying, respecting, and relishing all the differences that are out there and how beautiful they are. John Waters was similar. He wrote a book called Role Models, which is shockingly enough about the people who identify as role models. And some of them are people that you might expect, such as the designer and owner of the fashion house Comme des Garçons, right? It's like rich people being connected with rich people. But then he's got a chapter of like a 50-year-old stripper / bartender from a lesbian bar in Baltimore.
Yeah.
And he means no irony. He means no disrespect. He is incredibly sincere in finding the beauty in everyday things that might be upsetting to Americans' cultural sensibilities. If you've seen any of his movies, it's not a stretch to think that that's the case. But there's beauty to be found, and relish the time that you have on this planet. Find that beauty, be grateful for it. And I think that sort of gets to like the Willow aspect, which is, I'm just butchering it. It's, like life stinks or whatever it is. Like smile away. It's not life stinks. I know it's definitely not that.
Yeah. I've never experienced, I was always one that, like, when it comes like it's more of a metaphysical realm of the world of like energy and feeling energy and being like soaking in energy. I always thought that was kind of corny until I met Willow, because when you're in her presence, she has a different energy about her, and she changes the dynamic of the room, even before she performs. Like, she just has this aura about her, and then when she hits the curtain, it's contagious. Like, she comes out and she's clapping and she's smiling, and it immediately the energy of the room changes. And maybe I'm just crazy by feeling this or experiencing this, but I've talked to other fans of hers and they agree with that as well. And it's insane to see her do that in smaller independent shows, and then her music hits in AEW and she's doing it in front of an entire arena, and they're experiencing that as well. Like, I was at AEW last night wearing my Willow shirt, seen another Willow fan, and just bonded over how contagiously positive she is. I'm like, oh, I'm a huge fan of hers. You know what I mean? Like, it's, I strive to hit that level of just being a light in a dark room, if that makes sense.
There has to be, so it's nothing matters. It's nothing matters. Yeah. Smile anyway, not life sucks. I got that colossally wrong.
Yeah.
Right. But I think that the common thread across the three of them is to just find and embrace the beauty. Because there's plenty that can bring you down if you let it. But we're all here for a limited time. So why would you spend your time doing that if you have an alternative option that can bring you joy? But I think, Willow's also a great example, like as a strong woman and setting that example. I think having a different flavor of professional wrestling, go back and watch the 80s, setting aside the fact that, most women's matches in the 80s were a novelty. And before that, heavily regulated. Wrestling in the 80s and the 90s, there's a certain universal flavor of screamy guys screaming at each other. You needed to have a hoarse voice. You needed to spit chaw down your chin like Stan Hansen, or throttle Mean Gene's neck like Andre. You need to talk incoherently like Hogan or Savage or Warrior. Charismatic incomprehension got you very far. But there was nobody who said, you know what, I'm just happy to be here and I'm going to try my best. There is a portion of the audience that I think is tired of gritty, is tired of dark. They've seen too many things that resemble, Christopher Nolan's Batman trilogy, and don't get on some tangent about how it's a marvelous program. Like,
I hate it.
It's okay. It's okay.
Yeah, okay,
but
at best.
It's gritty and dark, and then they brought it back, and it was whoever the other guy was. I'm
a huge Batman fan, and people get so mad at me when I say I don't like the Nolan movies.
Yes, they're perfectly cromulent.
They're fine movies, but they're not. I don't like them as a Batman fan.
Yeah. So incidentally, I started reading comics about 7 months ago,
Really?
and I never really had read them before, other than like a little Tales from the Crypt as a child. And I've been reading Dick Tracy. There's a pure sunk cost
Yeah.
fallacy. There's a pure sunk cost fallacy to Dick Tracy now. It's a total reboot, and there's blood, and he swears, and characters die. And I'm just curious where they're going. I'm not enjoying it because does the world, does the artistic and cultural world truly need yet one more thing that's dark and gritty?
Yeah.
The world that we live in is dark and gritty, and it's mean and it's spiteful. That's why somebody like Willa succeeds, is that if we believe wrestling is escapism, we want escapism to make us feel comfortable, not always to terrify us, not always to thrill us. But you know what? Like, even in spite of that, something that is comfortable can also comfort us by fighting like hell, which she did, had one of my favorite matches of the last 4 months with Stat a couple weeks ago. Just an incredible match. But I think, you know,
Her
from
and
a wrestling,
Athena is probably the best women's match I've ever seen in the history of our business. When her and Athena main evented the first women's ROH pay-per,
yeah,
like they were the first women to main event a pay-per-view. I still think they're two people I love in this industry. I think they're two of the best females in the business, and I think they had the best women's match of all time.
yeah, and I think I'll credit Cheeseburger again. Like I said, I've seen him have at least 75 opportunities to be fuming mad, and he's only ever really taken advantage of that twice.
Yeah.
So there's something about being above it all, or being willing to find the joy no matter how hard opportunities get, no matter how down you are, to try to lift somebody else up. It's pretty essential. Granted, I do none of those things, but you were asking about more admiration and inspiration.
Yeah, I wish I could be at that level as well. Totally. There are people I definitely look at to as well. What are some goals you have for yourself personally or in your industry?
Stay alive and make money.
All right. I love that. Short and sweet. And then outside of professional wrestling, we kind of touched on reading and kind of getting into books and stuff, video game wise, even. What are some interests or hobbies you have outside of professional wrestling?
I game a little bit. I collect records.
Okay.
You know, like everybody in wrestling has their own flavor of nerd. So I collect records. I really enjoy going to shows. Like I said, I saw The Exploited last night. Am I going to somebody this week? Went to a wonderful metal festival in Montague, Massachusetts. Got to see Prong, Bongzilla, Witching from Philadelphia, a bunch of other metal bands, and circumstantially ran into an old friend from roller derby. He's like a Montreal guy, but he was in the middle of Massachusetts for no reason. Hadn't seen him in 7 years. So like going to shows, like traveling. So taking December off, gonna disappear and go abroad for a little bit. Do some hiking, do some backpacking, eat some cheese. Try to speak a few languages that I don't know.
I love that. What are some words of encouragement? I know you have a bunch of good gems throughout this podcast of just that I really enjoyed, but words of encouragement for a beginner, whether it's even in this industry or just trying to chase their dreams in general.
I have a poster. Shame to admit I bought something off of an Instagram ad, but I bought a poster, a screen print that's hanging on my wall at my office. It's a photograph of Hayao Miyazaki, the Studio Ghibli guy. And he's sitting there, and he's sort of blithely holding a cigarette with a lilted hand. And the translation below is from a documentary about his filmmaking. And there's this fascinating juxtaposition where Miyazaki makes these gorgeous full-length feature pics, vibrant colors, beautiful characters, joyous life, lush escapes. Everything's vibrant and wonderful. And he is a cantankerous, miserable human being, ashamed of his own sons. He went into retirement, and his son took over his film empire. I can't remember his son's film, but Hayao hated it so much, he came out of retirement, and he's still making films. And it's like 3 films ago. He is a cantankerous human being, also something I admire. And contrast that with Junji Ito, who has written like Tomie, Uzumaki. I can't think of any others. I think those are the two that I've read, which are some of the most visually upsetting, just incredible manga of the last decade or so, the limited that I've read. And he's writing these horror books with just visuals that make your stomach churn and look away. And he's a joyful little cat guy. He has a book about his cat and how much he loves his cat. And so I adore the study and contrast between those two. Anyway, I've gotten taking the scenic route to the point. This poster of Miyazaki, he's sitting and he looks exasperated. He's got a cigarette in his hand. And the quote below says, "Everything in life is a hassle. People ask me, well, why don't you quit? To them, I say, shut up."
Simple.
I love it.
Yeah.
Shut up. Everything in life is a hassle. Why don't you quit? Shut up.
And the last one here. What are you grateful for, and are you currently happy?
I'm struggling for an answer because I don't want to give you like a boring, typical one, but I think existence, right? I am free in this sense that, and Berger and I were talking about this on the car ride. Like, I wrestle without the pressure of, say, worrying about, say, how our bill is going to get paid. This will never be a full-time career for a host of reasons. Some obvious and some less so. But I'm free to choose what I want, when I want, and how I want. I'm grateful for the people that I know. I'm grateful for the family that I have. I'm grateful for the support systems that I have. I'm grateful for the LLC. So I think that's, a lot of things. I'm grateful for not having any bookings this weekend because I probably put upwards of 50 hours in cars just on weekends across August and September. My back is crying out in pain from just sitting in a car for so long. So I'm going to clean the house really well. It deserves it. Maybe go to the art museum and find like a really great restaurant in Center City. Like, I'm grateful for, Royal Izakaya. I think that's where we'll go. So I'm grateful for the fact that every day I get to choose my own path and I have the freedom, the autonomy to, with no stress, choose exactly what I want. And I wish everybody could experience that degree of autonomy in adulthood. Again, except for Travis and Max.
Of course, yeah. My chest is still, yeah. Thank you so much for your time. We went a little longer than expected, but it was a beautiful conversation. Going back to you said about your role models, inspirations, and just finding the beauty and pureness of the small things in life to have a larger scale of. It's essentially what I do on this podcast. Like, I enjoy hearing people's conversations. I hear learning about people and what makes them tick, and it motivates me. Like, I go through these days where I'm so damn depressed that I want to get to bed, and then I record one of these podcasts, and then after I'm done, I feel like I'm rejuvenated. Like, I just got it's such an adrenaline rush of just like, oh, and then everyone like, oh, this is the art I like, or this is the person I'm into, and then I deep dive that, and it just, I don't know, I love it, and I really appreciate it, and thank you once again for a great conversation. Thank you for bringing me into High Tension, for a commentary job of a place I've always wanted to sit behind the desk for a very, very long time, and I appreciate you just kind of giving me that spark today. It means a lot. Everyone, please go and check out the links below for merch pages and how to support and follow on social media. Anything else you want to plug to get out there before we leave?
I will plug. So, like I said, I will be vacationing in December, but I am looking to schedule some November 2024. Well, depending on when this gets out, this might be moot. November 2024, early 2025 dates. Again, take everything I just said with a grain of salt. I'm always likely to give a promotion a chance. And I expect that if you give me a chance, you will not be disappointed.
Love that. Well, listen, if I'm on commentary and I can extend the offer of what you offered me, I'll definitely put your name into more promotions. And if more people hear that, they should be booking you and doing some awesome stuff. Yeah. All right. Well, that'll do it for the ABJ podcast. Thank you all so much for hanging out. We'll see you next time. Here's some music by the Converse Kid.